Welcome back. You're watching NewsCheck. On this second hour, we will be talking about the Air Quality Awareness Week. Of course, it started running yesterday all the way to the 5th. Tomorrow is a signature event. It's been called Nairobi Ride for Life, the cycling procession through the Nairobi Business District to create a community movement for clean air and the provision of better and safer walking and cycling infrastructure. The event is led by Clean Air Catalyst. And in the studio, I have Ivy Murger, the program manager, and I also have Dr. George Mwaniki, the head of air quality at the same. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us. Karibuni sana. I hoped actually to see you with bicycles, but since you walked here, you still feel the purpose, right? Why didn't you come with bicycles? Is it a cycling event?
It's a cycling event, but the key event is tomorrow. Okay. So prepping for the bikes and everything is happening. But yes, tomorrow we'll have all our cycling gear ready.
Daktari, Ama, you walked here?
I left my house. Of course, every journey in Nairobi starts with walking. You walk either to the stage or to your car. Yeah. And then I came to Nairobi for obvious concerns. I didn't want to use a bicycle today. Okay. But tomorrow I'll be on a bike.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's talk about this program and just look at the overview, the whole agenda. What is it about?
The Air Quality Awareness Week. Yes. So it is a global, awareness program led by US EPA. But for the first time, Nairobi will be participating. Okay. And through the Clean Air Catalyst program, WRI, of course, our partners within the Clean Air Catalyst program, NEMA, and Nairobi City County Government and other partners, we will be hosting for the first time a major event. Of course, there are many themes throughout the week. There's, I think today is Asthma Day and air pollution, but tomorrow is on transportation and air pollution. So we felt let's do something very critical for the city of Nairobi. There's a lot of emissions due to transport, of course. So together with Critical Mass Nairobi, who been promoting awareness on emissions and better cycling and safer routes for the cyclists in Nairobi. Safer Nairobi initiative, again, the Nairobi City County Government, NEMA, and other partners. We want to showcase that routes within Nairobi, within the CBD actually, just to create awareness and conversations towards, moving towards safer, less use of cars, of course. So we thought, why not do something very impactful?
You talk about safer.
Yes.
Probably let's talk about safe before we get to safer. We are about 5 million people in Nairobi. The population is bursting. Daktari, how would you rate the air we breathe, first of all, before we even talk about safer? Is it even safe?
Good question. The air in Nairobi is quite dirty. Relative in East Africa, the situation is worsening. It has worsened 180 times in the 1960s, comparing to our neighbors, Addis Ababa and Kampala. And every year in Nairobi, or in Kenya, we lose around 28,000 people because of the effects of air pollution. And I have to mention the reason why this awareness week is so critical. In the air pollution space, we've been talking to each other for a long time. We've been talking among ourselves. And then we are starting to open up and let's talk to other people. The day we opened that and talked to, for example, the Nairobi City County health officers, they actually showed us their health data, and they said 30% of the Nairobi health budget goes to address upper and lower respiratory diseases, which are very common diseases that are driven or worsened by air pollution. So it's time to broaden that conversation to the 5 million and even broader to the 50 million.
Let's talk about 1960 and 2023. Why has the situation been compounded?
Mainly is the population, as you mentioned. The population is growing, and thus the activities that drive air pollution are also expanding. For example, the #1 driver of air pollution in Nairobi is vehicles, transport. We have a lot of diesel vehicles that do emit a lot of really dirty air from the tailpipes. We also have waste management. We have not been able to address that conclusively, so most of our waste is managed, not most, but a big portion of our waste is managed through open burning, and that drives air pollution. Industries is another major source. Roads themselves, the unpaved roads, and also brake wear, tire wear, all those contribute to air pollution. And also we do have regional transport. In case we have a fire somewhere in the neighboring counties, we have industries, for example, in Mavoko, all those emissions sometimes are blown up into Nairobi.
Wow.
Yeah, and more complicated is the chemistry of the atmosphere. The atmosphere is not a neutral space. There is a lot of chemistry that takes place, and some of the emissions we produce interact with other chemicals, and there is a lot of chemical reactions in the atmosphere that also worsens air pollution. Yeah.
So typically what happens tomorrow?
Typically what happens tomorrow? So we'll have a convening at the governor's office. So we will have we'll have WRI Africa, of course. We'll have USAID with us. We will have the deputy governor officially flagging us off, and we have the pleasure of having Honorable Lesuda as well, who's been pushing for, the bill.
Okay.
So we are very excited about that. And then at 8:30 we flag off around the city. We'll start from the city hall, Jivanji, Mwindimbingu, Koinange, and end up again at City Hall. And then after that, we want to have an open dialogue, from participants, just to hear from them, their experience and what change they want to see from, stakeholders, including, the donor community, including the development partners, including now the county itself as well, NEMA, what do they want? And it will be just an open session to just speak about the experience and change we want to see in the city of Nairobi.
And this movement is cycling and walking?
It is cycling and walking. With
On a lighter note, I hope you've spoken to Bungei, the Nairobi Police Commandant, permission to do the moving around the city.
We officially have the approval.
Absolutely.
From all parties.
Part of the agenda is showing support for policies and infrastructure that encourage non-motorized transport. Let's begin there. Has there been any attempt, either by the county government of Nairobi or the national government, to come up with a policy or legislation geared towards encouraging non-motorized transport?
Yes, I think the Nairobi County does have a policy on NMT, non-motorized transport.
Yes.
And that's why you're seeing a lot of investments towards walking, riding bikes, and those kind of different modes. At the national level, I know there is... I don't know whether it's an explicit policy, but there is a requirement that when roads are being constructed, there should be a provision for pedestrian walks, which are quite useful. They say 70% of transport or movement in Nairobi is usually NMT. Mainly walking. Cycling also happens to a very lesser extent, but mostly 70% of Nairobians walk to work.
Wow.
So if you look at the investments we are making for big highways, nice roads, we are actually investing for 30%. What about the 70% of Nairobians? And that's why this kind of awareness and this kind of awareness creation and promotion of NMT is a very critical thing for the city. We need to start thinking about the 70% who are not driving to work.
As we talk about the 70%, yet we still find the city so congested. Should we move it then to 100 and then achieve decongestion in the city?
I think congestion is driven by many things. Of course, initially when the city was designed, I don't think it was designed for more than 500,000 people. Right now we are 5 million people going to 7. So already there is pressure on the available infrastructure, and that is driving some of the congestion. Although I think there is need to think about how do we make some streets within Nairobi vehicle-free, where we can walk and interact freely. A part of human nature is the desire to interact. I don't have to talk to you, but when I see you, I feel, okay, we are fine. So we might need to think about that. I think the county government has tried to do this previously. It didn't go very well for some reasons. I don't want to guess. but I think there is need for citizens also to really appreciate walking and kind of interacting with other people in the city and having some vehicle-free zones. And I hope maybe in the future, once we have enough electric vehicles, we can just dedicate a few streets for electric electrified vehicles, and if it's not electrified, then you walk. And that makes the city quite livable. It's a very livable space. If you go
talk about congestion and what it does to air pollution.
So air pollution is one of those very ignored pollution aspects. When you drink dirty water, within a couple of hours, you'll be running to the hospital to get treated. If you eat dirty food, the same thing happens. But when you breathe in dirty air, I usually like comparing dirty air with a watch that is delayed 2 minutes. So if your watch is losing 2 minutes every 1 hour, you might not notice in the first 2-3 days, but 5 months from now, you will actually lose a whole day. And this is how air pollution behaves. It cuts your life slowly, and then mostly it drives premature deaths. In the world, 1 in 8 people who dies globally dies because of impact of air pollution. And because of that slow killing effect, it usually doesn't get the attention that it deserves. And then it's mostly ignored. But we are seeing a lot of effort. There is a lot of push from the global community, starting with the WHO and also what we are doing as WRI, to kind of sensitize people about the importance of air pollution. I give you a quick example. Since we met, which I think is probably 10 minutes ago, we have both taken in around 60 liters of air. It is.
I hope it was not dirty.
I hope it wasn't. But it has gone straight to our lungs and directly to our bloodstream without any filtration system. For example, if this water is not clean, then my stomach has enough acids to kind of try and address that before it goes to the system itself. But air does not go through any major filters. It goes straight to the bloodstream. And I think when God was creating human beings nicely, I don't want to say he never envisioned, but he thought we'll always live in a clean air environment. But he considered we might eat dirty fruits and dirty water, so he put some acid and all those things in the tummy. So for air, the pollution was mostly unexpected and is really impacting our lives. And the interesting thing about pollution, air pollution, is the air you're breathing in now probably just left a tailpipe a couple of minutes ago from a car. It probably came from a waste burning pile. We share air with everything, almost everything that is living or is burning. We share the air with that. And it's an issue that we need to give a little bit more attention than we are giving it at the moment.
Probably this is a point where we blame Adam for ensuring that we are out of the Garden of Eden. If we were still at the Garden of Eden, probably the lungs would still have been functioning the way they should. But when you talk about the attempts that have been made probably by the county government to ensure that the streets are safe, even in terms of the absorption of the air we're breathing in, I find a problem with the mentality. Is it mental shift we need, particularly in Nairobi?
Yes.
Is it a mental shift that is needed, or is it civic education? What is it?
Yes, there's a lot of civic education, but I always stress that perhaps we need behavioral change. Everyone needs to change. Behavioral change. If you want to make changes to address climate change, to say air quality and emissions and pollution, every one of us has to change, and behavioral change. And it's key when we're trying to address, environmental issues in the country, in the city. So you and I also have to change our mentality of how we address things. There is no harm in not driving. But if we have good infrastructure, I guess we can all move towards, a walking nation. NMT can be, everyone can accept it. So we have to have behavioral change as we go ahead. I think, and this is an opportunity for us. As I said, the theme for this year is working together for clean air. So if we all have this conversation, and that's why I feel like the dialogue would be very important, and it will be important, is for people to start thinking of the change and how we can change, you and I, Yes.
When other than obsession with driving, what are the other behavioral change you think should be introduced, particularly in Nairobi?
Particularly, even waste. How we work on our waste. And I think this should start even at a very young age, inculcating young minds at a very young age on waste. And also, I still go back to infrastructure. We should have infrastructure, very good infrastructure, and this goes back also to the county and all other partners, have good infrastructure on waste disposal and all that. So yes, I think there's a lot to be done. There's a lot to be done. Yes.
There's a report, I think, that 2 years ago, something like that, Doctor, you can help me here, blaming mental deformity of children in Nairobi to the state of the air we are breathing.
Yes. And I actually think the story goes way back in the 1980s when we used to add lead in fuel. This was a global phenomenon. Yeah. And they realized in some of these cities when they monitor behaviors, citizen behaviors, they noticed where we had very high elevated lead concentrations in the air, there was increased criminality between in the young people. Yeah. So air pollution does affect several systems within our body, mainly the mental development of young children. You're exposed to air pollution even when the fetus is in the womb. Some of the other leading things include lung cancer. Is a major cause. Is majorly driven by exposure to air pollution. There is a host of diseases. I think there are more than 20 diseases that are driven by air pollution. But right now we are working closely with the city. They have recognized actually some of the major diseases, and air pollution is driving between 10 to 15% of those specific diseases cases in Nairobi. And now we are getting a lot of traction to try and address the air pollution issue. I
hope you speak to Sakaja about his lorries transporting to Dandora. They have a very funny stench that lasts for a whole day.
The governor of Nairobi is one of our greatest supporters. During COP27, he was in our event in Egypt, and he gave full support that he is going to work with us and the entire Nairobi Air Quality Working Group, which is around 60 organizations, to improve air quality. And when we proposed the idea of cycling in the city to promote or to create awareness on NMT, non-motorized transport, he really quickly endorsed the idea and kind of allowed us to move ahead with this. And I like the fact that you say the lorries transporting waste are a huge air pollution source. There's a study we did like 3 months ago asking Nairobians, what do you think is air pollution? And most of them linked air pollution with smells. If something stinks, it smells, garbage rotting, then they think that is air pollution. While in the real sense, air pollution does not smell, you can see it, but you're breathing it in.
So you're saying it's safe to smell those lorries?
The smell is also a concern. A bigger concern.
It is a concern. Yeah. Let's talk about the infrastructure you're talking about.
Yes.
To aid the walking and the cycling, as we encourage it, do we have that infrastructure? Do we have cycling lanes, for example? Do we have walking lanes? Not just in the CBD, but even from the estates pouring into the CBD.
I mean, I can speak from some of the areas we're seeing. There's a lot of infrastructure coming up, and I think we need to commend the county. There's Luthuli Avenue. There was a lot of change that was done there, and I think it's part of the route we will do just for people to compare, something that has been done and actually is working, and I hear a lot of the shops along there were very happy when cars were removed from that area. They said even their business, people are coming in now because there's less emissions happening there. So yes, we are slowly seeing infrastructure, and I believe in some of the neighborhoods a lot is changing. So we would like, the county is doing something on it, and there's again a lot to be done, but we are slowly seeing infrastructure changing in Nairobi. I know Critical Mass Nairobi, which are part of the partners tomorrow, and they're doing a lot of sensitization and advocacy towards ensuring infrastructure for cyclists within Nairobi, because we're slowly seeing a lot of people picking up cycling within the city. Yes.
In places like Cuba, for example, I saw a situation where these lanes are dedicated to cycling, like you're saying, walking, or even people who want to run for health reasons. The only question when you come back to Nairobi is, okay, some of them exist. Are they safe?
Good question. At least we are making progress in the right direction. I would say we are there yet. There is a lot that still needs to be done. And it is very rare to reach a point where we are just using 100% NFT. So when designing transport, how people and goods move in the city, we have to think about how do we integrate this. Because I would have loved to ride a bike here, but from where I stay to where I would get public transport, it is a long distance. So sometimes you choose then to use a car or to use other means to kind of close that gap. If then at the bus stop there was a place I could latch my bike and then get into a matatu to come to town, then I would have maybe done that. And maybe once I reach town, then when I'm dropped by the bus, I can walk to the place I need to go. So thinking of how do we integrate these different modes is very critical. At least it does start with the investment in each of the modes. So we have done substantially well in investing for walking. Not cycling. Cycling still there is a lot of work to be done. But the other day you can actually walk from the CBD up to Karen without actually stepping on mud and all that, because there are nice provisions for walking. Whether those walk paths are dedicated only for walking, sometimes you find a boda guy just.
That is the point.
so we need to think about how to integrate this. And also what Ivy is saying, there is some need of behavior change.
Yes.
You see, in Nairobi, when you are driving or walking, when you see an empty space, is a space for you to occupy, and this has to change. Yes. Even the motorcycles, the bodas have to keep the motorized parts of the transport lanes and leave the non-motorized lanes for non-motorized transport. I think there is need for that. I think it will come slowly, but I am hopeful we'll get there.
Sometimes behavioral change can be enforced through enforcement by the law, because I'm wondering, the 1,000 ways to die faster, I think walking in Nairobi should have been included there, because if you're not hit by a mkokoteni, you will be hit by a motorcycle.
Yes.
And all that points about the dangers of walking. There are people who would want to walk for health reasons for that purpose. But then again, when you imagine the hassle throughout, it becomes a problem.
Yes. Again, a lot needs to be done. I mean, this is a call for everyone, be it the county, be it us, as George is saying, a boda guy there, so we need to it still goes back to our whole conversation about behavioral change, and I still go back to the theme of the week. It's working together to work. So I would expect, as we start this journey, because this is our first inaugural event for Nairobi, and we hope for it to be an annual event. So I hope we will see a change. We'll come back here in 5 years and say, we did have a change. Yes.
I'm thinking of enforcement because, like the walking lanes in the CBD are only dedicated to walking. How come then that the motorcycles that flout that, we don't see they're clamping down? Even where you talk about Luthuli Avenue, you will still, some notorious driver parked there for 10, 15 minutes and then left. We have a problem generally with enforcement. It is like we have to keep policing people to do the right thing, which now leads me to your engagement with the governor for Nairobi.
Yes.
What is your engagement with him, particularly on ensuring that it's the enforcement of the rules, the bylaws of what we used to call Kanju?
That's a very interesting question. I personally don't believe anybody breaks the law intentionally. People break the law for convenience purposes. if you see
which is still intentional.
It is intentional, but it's more of convenient. If you're breaking the law because you tried the lawful means, and maybe you're finding yourself wasting a lot of time or delay, or it's risky, and then you're like, okay, let me then use this. Hopefully I get lucky today. And we do have a lot of those issues in transport, if we have to be honest with how the city is. I think issues of transport do go back all the way to planning. If you look at the city, it has 3 master plans since the colonial times up to the Kidero period. And sometimes these master plans do not interact with each other. They don't have serious consideration for transport for the 70%, the NMT people, the bikes. And therefore, when a good intention comes into place, that we need people to start walking more in the CBD, is not supported by the master plan, or is not supported by some of the plans that were done a long time ago that influence how the city was designed. And this creates a challenge. In fact, I would say as we move in the future, the current walkways, for example, the one I mentioned from town to Karen, is next to Gong Road. So when you're walking, you're actually getting exposed to really heavy transport emissions. And there is a possibility that we can have a walkway that goes to Karen, passes some of the neighborhoods nicely without major roads. And that is why I hope the city would reach at some point. Where we are is the starting point. And I hope in the future we'll try to separate the two modes of transport. So you can also enjoy your walk all the way to Westlands in a nice non-motorized area where you can actually see the surrounding, breathe fresh air, and feel proud to be a Nairobian.
You talked about smell, and I'm wondering the efforts by the government to clean Nairobi River. First of all, you thoughts about it, about cleaning Nairobi River?
WRI is actually part of the commission as an observer to the Nairobi River Commission. I think cleaning Nairobi River is complex. In fact, it remind me two things. If you want to know how well a city is doing, you breathe their air. It can tell you whether they're managing their waste well, their vehicles are nice, how is everything going. Now, if the air is clean, the next level that you look at is actually urban rivers. How are the rivers? And in those two aspects, if you look at our city, we are not doing very well. Nairobi River is complex. When we talk about issues of Nairobi River and rehabilitation, everybody tends to think about the informal settlements where the rivers mostly pass through. But the real challenge also, it's from the up markets. If you look at I go back to how the city was planned. Initially, the city was planned during the colonial times. It was not planned for Africans. It was planned for the settlers and also for the Asians. The settlers were taking the Kilimani, the high-end areas, and then the Asians were dedicated to Westlands, Parklands areas. And some areas were considered not fit for human settlement, and these were the valleys. They were risky, and that's why. So when the Africans were coming now to the city to provide the labor, they found a city that is not planned for them. So they had to look for where can we settle as we provide labor and other services to the city. So they went to the unplanned areas, and that's why they ended up in all the valleys. That's why you see all the slums in Nairobi have a word Mukuru or Valley in it. Mukuru kwa Rube, Mukuru kwa Jenga, Madare Valley. And it was accidental now. Those valleys is where most of Nairobi rivers do pass. And because they were initially not planned, I don't know whether they're being planned now, the issue of Nairobi River then became a serious challenge because of that poor planning initially. And if we have to address that, it has to have a lot of community engagement because we cannot be seen to be driving some levels of inequality by really forcing people within those valleys to change, while the entire city, some of the areas where the river passes through, we are not requesting the same level of change and investment in the river. I think it's a complex thing. It requires the support of the national government, and I'm happy that that has already been provided. I'm really keen to see how this evolved.
And I'll come back to you again on the same, but part of the deliberations tomorrow, after the cycling, what do you expect will be the outcome of the deliberations you will have?
There's a lot of talk, and we're seeing it in other cities, you know, car-free days. Can we have that in Kenya? Can we have that in Nairobi? So I feel like that conversation will come up. And in car-free days, we can see even we have our partners like Airco who already have low-cost monitors, you know. And actually, just to mention, NEMA will have a monitoring lab in real time showing, you know, what our emission levels will be on that day. So are we ready for, you know, car-free days? These are some of the conversations we expect. And of course, as we said, safety. A lot of the cyclists would love to have safe roads, safe, you know, including border borders not coming in and blocking them. So I feel like the conversations will be coming. And also, I think policy, and this is charged now to the national government and the county, policy will come up as well. But we want to hear from the citizens themselves. What do they expect from all of us?
It actually reminds me that I think sometime last year, but we had Sonko grass along Jogo Road. I don't know where it went nowadays. And there used to be kanjos there policing, if you step on the grass, it does not exist anymore. You got to just have its remedies. But let's come back to the issue of Nairobi River. Is it true that Nairobi's sewerage system, the end tunnel of it is into Nairobi River?
Yes, I refer to a study I participated in, I think in 2017. Yeah. And we looked at Nairobi River from source, Kikuyu, all the way to the Indian Ocean. Yeah. And what we found out was the river is truly a disaster. It's mostly dead for the most part because of the kind of and that is mainly contributed by what Nairobi as a city does to the river before the river goes downstream, and there are people consuming the water of the river downstream. The river had a lot of biodiversity going downstream. It does support a lot of farms, but what we are doing to the river as the city, we need to reconsider that. Not the entire sewer, but there is a lot of sewer systems going to the river. There is a lot of industrial waste going to the river. There is a lot of unmanaged solid waste going to the river. And what this does is, as those waste continues to rot in the river, they consume most of the oxygen that is inside the water. And most of the living things, the small animals in the water, kind of lack the oxygen and they die off. And this is a phenomenon that is right across the river.
When you talk about the city, what we are doing to the river as a city, you mean that the pollution only happens within the Nairobi city?
I would say 90%.
90%
of the pollution is within the city. Because once you leave the city and go to the other river sections, in Ukambani region, what you might see there are just small farm inputs getting to the river. The biggest offender is really Nairobi city.
The biggest offender is Nairobi city. Going back to the deliberations and probably encompassing the Nairobi County government. Long ago, I think the time of the late Gaku, who was the town clerk, there used to be dustbins all over, and people are really responsible about dumping. I mean, is it possible, you will ask Saka, what really happened to this? Because even, where you can throw your waste is not readily available. And if it is available, it is already dismantled, probably by the town dwellers, the ones we call street children.
Yes, I must say, we've been seeing bins and
several,
yes. So I think there are already steps being carried out. I'm sure it will come up tomorrow as well, and what else can be done. But yes, even our own practice, when we are going to have, preach by doing, we will have bins, and this is county actually providing, how we will break down our recycling. We'll have water for everyone. We'll have, for example, bananas, good for your health after cycling. We tend to show how we can, recycle and arrange our garbage as well. So I think there are steps being done, and even us during our event, we will showcase that. But I for sure think that will come out tomorrow. Our deliberations will come, and it's good to hear from the county what they are going to do. I'm sure there's a panel already from the county who will be addressing some of these questions. Yes.
Daktari, before I ask you what we can do with Dandora, let's still come back to the Nairobi River. Have we seen proactive steps taken by government, for example, even the national government, to deal with institutions discharging effluents into the river, particularly Pande hii ya juu? We even have, sorry to say for the viewer, even mortuaries discharging effluents into the river. I am sure the government is aware. Have we seen proactive action being taken by government institutions, for example?
Maybe the best way to address that. In 1926, the then Prime Minister of UK, Churchill, visited this region. He came to Nairobi and Uganda, When he went to Uganda, he called Uganda the Pearl of Africa. He thought it was the most beautiful part of Africa. When he came to Nairobi, he said some very interesting comments. He said, this is the worst place possible to locate a city. But the mistake has been done. Let's proceed.
Oh, God.
And if you read the history of Nairobi and why it's located where it was, it's absolutely accidental. It's actually because of the railway station, because they wanted to figure out how to go through the escarpment. And for that reason, there is a lot of things that sometimes we find are not working. We do require, or we need the government to do a lot of work. I have to mention, I used to be a government employee like 5 years ago. And one of the things you notice once you are inside government, there is a lot of really good experts. But the problem is they are extremely few. The experts who really understand water and what needs to be done are there. But they're very few. For example, the Ministry of Environment did have the Nairobi River Commission with 3 people, really. What can you do with 3 people running an entire commission? So there is a lot of good intention from the government side. The capacities to do this might be a challenge in terms of personnel and kind of monitoring. And that's why working with government and looking for external partners, really. And when we talk in external partners in Kenya, we usually think of people outside Kenya. Like really people from Nairobi itself, youth group, women group, men group. I don't know whether those exist now. The government will be very much willing to work with them and even address some of the offenders. I think the previous regime we also saw the Nairobi rehabilitation plan. They were trying to demolish the construction next to the riparian zones, and it's an effort that we Nairobians appreciated and also hated equally at the same measure. So it's a complex thing, and I don't like putting the blame in government mostly, but also I like asking what can we do as citizens at our own levels to improve this. Yeah.
Let's talk about Dandora. Dandora is an eyesore. And I think everybody who runs for governor in Nairobi has an idea of what to do with Dandora dump site until they get elected.
Yes.
But what is that one silver bullet that we'll deal with? First of all, because of the dangers it exposes children and the people who live around there. But then again, for people who call it a resource, why do we call it a resource?
It's again, we have to go to the poor planning of this city. And now when we had the new constitution, we made Nairobi almost an independent county. So now, I know there have been a couple of negotiations where Nairobi was looking at neighboring counties, whether they can host some of their waste. The discussions go very well until politics kick in. And then somebody comes in from Oranga, for example, and says, now they want to bring all the waste.
I don't know why you had to say Oranga.
Oranga. And that makes it really complicated. If you look at the entire city, for example, where can we really design and develop a good dump site? It's a big question that I don't think we have a simple answer. Dandora is always viewed as a temporary solution. It's a temporary solution that has become permanent. There is a lot of people who depend on the dump site for livelihoods. But the issues around the dump sites are really, really complicated. I think we'll need a whole day to really discuss this and even discuss the whole architecture of waste, solid waste management in Nairobi. One of the things is when you see people from other countries come here, they usually say, let's try and segregate waste at source. And we find these to be very good ideas until we do segregate at source. But we do not have recycling facilities where to take the segregated waste. So once we collect the segregated waste downstream, we mix them and take them to Dandora. But the other day I was being asked by some guys in UK, why don't you guys do segregation at source? And I said, we do segregation, but we don't do it at source. We do it at the tailpipe. Because when you go to Dandora, it's very difficult to see any recyclable materials within that site.
Actually, the people doing segregation of waste are the street boys.
Yes, and they're doing it in Dandora. So there is no matter how crazy it looks, there are things within the systems that are working. Is how do we see how to promote this? I know there are plans, I have heard it in the streets, of coming up with a waste into energy facility for Dandora. But I know this has been tried 3, 4, 5 times. It's complicated because most of the waste going there is also very wet. And to burn that to produce electricity is quite expensive. It is a complex issue. I don't think it's easy to crack, but it does require a lot of people sitting around and having an honest conversation how to manage our waste. Although if you talk to people from the informal settlement, the usually say, and I think we had a group from Muungano na Vijiji, they were saying, us in the informal settlements, where you guys are bringing your waste, we actually don't generate any waste. What if we said everybody to keep their own waste? It was an interesting question.
Very interesting.
That's an interesting conversation. Out of the deliberations yesterday, because I realize you have the Honorable Naisula Lesuda as part of the deliberations you have tomorrow. Is there a possible focus on the legal framework around what you're advancing? And whether to test whether there's a bit of emptiness in the existing legal framework around issues of cycling and walking and encouraging non-motorized transport.
Let me speak on what the catalyst plans to do. And we want to do a deep dive, be it at policy and legal. Actually, we just finished a political economy analysis of Nairobi and looking at all the sectors.
Wow.
and yes, we are charged with trying to address legal frameworks that are taking place and just to see what are the gaps. And we would like to invite the parliamentary committee, for example, and other members, and sensitization and try and find solutions together. So yes, so we hope this could be also a channel for us to access some of these members to discuss these deliberations for sure. The Clean Air Catalyst is really keen to find local solutions, and that starts from policy as well, and also community engagement, just to know what needs to change. So we hope that can be addressed.
And of course, it means you must drop in the Committee on Environment and the other one for transport.
Yes, we actually had them. We actually had them 2 weeks ago.
Both committees or the committee?
The Environment Committee. We sensitized them on air quality and climate, and how they can support even illegally, pushing some of the bills that are waiting to be supported at that level. So yes, there's a lot of, and they're very keen actually. They're very keen to support the program and to support addressing air quality. Yes.
Part of the Big Four agenda propped by the former president is manufacturing. The current president has said he will continue with the agenda, the Big Four agenda, part of it being manufacturing. With manufacturing obviously comes with some cropping up of industries, for example. Not entirely really, because manufacturing is not just about industries, but I'm envisioning industries as part of the manufacturing agenda. And emissions. Doesn't it complicate the agenda of clean air?
If it does, if we do it as business as usual.
Okay.
There is a lot of technologies available today to make sure that you can do clean production. In fact, if you look at most countries that do have industrial bases as a major source of air pollution, it's mainly from the energy side. What is the energy driving these industries? Most of our grid, 80% is renewable. It's green, it's geothermal, wind, solar, hydro. So I think industrialization might not be a challenge, but we have to make sure that as the industries, as we are promoting this, we have an incentive for cleaner production, and the ways that these companies can invest in a way that does not exacerbate environmental challenges.
Take up of technology, because you've talked about renewable energy and stuff like that, and particularly when it comes to wastewater management, including what we are releasing from our homes. Have we been able to take up technology, available technology, for example, even by Kenyan scientists, to deal with such problems?
Good question. I think for Kenya, we are very good at taking up technologies if they make sense and they are cheap enough for us.
If they make sense.
If they make sense. I think for technologies to limit air pollution, we have some very serious problems there. And I think it is because of the awareness level. For example, when you're driving your car, there is something below called the muffler. We call it the muffler. The scientific word is the catalytic converter. That box is supposed to take the exhaust from the engine and clean it up, remove some of the impurities, air pollutants, and then spill out a little bit more cleaner air. That box is made up of some very precious metals, and in most vehicles in Nairobi, that box has nothing inside. It's just a metallic thing. When the vehicles arrive in Mombasa, the catalytic converter is removed, and people milk out the chemicals and re-export them. We are a major exporter of those chemicals, while we don't have a single mine. so the vehicles come, we mine that out. Sometimes you take your car to the garage. When it returns to you, the check engine light is on. And mostly it's because that chemical has been removed. So we are innovating in both ways, in the positive and also a little bit in the negative. But there is conversation that we are holding with NEMA and other stakeholders to see how can we safeguard. That would be the first step, really. How do we make sure that we are not destroying these catalytic converters, especially for vehicles coming to Nairobi, where the issue is critical.
So who participates in tomorrow's event as we near winding up?
Yes, so we have NEMA, of course, who will be showcasing the monitoring lab. We have Critical Mass Nairobi, who have been pushing the agenda for safer roads for cyclists. They'll be showcasing some of the works they've been doing. We have Safer in Nairobi Initiative. We have UNEP. Of course, we have our sponsor, USAID. And then, of course, the Nairobi City County Government.
Nairobi City County.
Yes, and then AirCo, who have local centers around Nairobi. They'll be showcasing real-time data just to see how our emissions doing on that specific day. Yes.
Cycling, will you participate? I'll come to you, yes.
Yes, cycling, yes, and I hope we will get to see you tomorrow.
I prefer walking.
Yes, and walking too.
In fact, I wanted to mention that we will have a spare bike, just in case you decide to join us. I also prefer walking, but if you join, we can cycle with you slowly.
Slowly, We'll catch up with the rest. So very quickly, in terms of advancing this interest of non-motorized transport, and not just for the sake of, non-motorized transport, the end game being, breathing in fresh air. How would you rate our efforts so far, and what is the silver bullet?
I think for clean air, Nairobi has taken enough baby steps. They have the right trajectory. We have the Clean Air Policy. We also have the Clean Air Act that was passed, I think, sometime June last year, was it? Or the previous year. So those are kind of nice legal provisions to support this. Now, coming up, how do we implement this? And this is where we are providing a lot of support to the city. We have shortlisted 2 sources as the clean air catalyst that we want to really focus and have a deep dive. One of them is actually 2- and 3-wheelers. What can be done in that space? Because one motorbike can emit as much air pollutants as 10 small vehicles. Mainly because they mix fuel and oil in the internal combustion engine, so they spew a lot of emissions. So what are some of the things that we can do there? And some of the ideas we have is how can we promote the use of electric motorbikes within the city? So that is part of the solution that I think we are going to be pushing very hard. There is also a solution on hospital solid waste management. How can we reduce the burning of them? That is something we'll be doing in the next 3 years. And then from those activities, we will actually be able to generate evidence that the county can use to kind of address emissions from the other sectors.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, both of you, Ivy and Daktari, for joining us this morning, and we wish you all the best. Oh, I will be there.
Thank you.
Walking.
Good. We'll be looking out for you.
Thank you. Asante sana. Thank you for your time. God bless you, and we wish you all the best in your efforts, obviously, to make Nairobi, probably even the entire country, cleaner and the air cleaner for the people. It's time for us to exit. Zainab Said is up next with Tamarini. Don't go too far.